Summerford. I was in, oh, do I need to start now? Okay, that shows record. I'll start all over. My name is Melissa Gomez Summerford. I was in cohort VIA 20, which was Team on Mute. And I did come in on mute, but not on purpose. So I'm glad I'm not on mute right now and you can hear me. A little bit about myself. I was in education for 16 years, so I was an elementary teacher. I love the littles, and that was my innovator project. How might we implement use of digital tools with our littles? So I love doing tools that are for littles. So I'm going to show you a system that I use in my classroom, some podcasting tools that I use. So I hope that you can benefit from these tools that I'm about to share you. Currently, right now, I do work for a company. It's called Fried Technology, where I get to showcase these tools with teachers. So I'm very grateful for that. And if you'd love to connect, I'm on all these socials on the internet. So you can find me there. Just type in at Summerford Stars. I'd love to connect. I love to grow and learn and make new friends. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. So pot it and watch them grow. And if you want this link, you can have access to this slide presentation if you type fried.tech/pot it. It is case sensitive, so it has to be uppercase P and uppercase IT. You can have access to this presentation so you can come back to it, because I did put some clickable pieces in there for you to come back, because you'll want to come back, because you'll probably like leave and you're like, what did this lady say? So you'll be able to come back to it. All right, so let's look at the goal today. So the goal in this session is, how might we promote student voice using a classroom podcast? Now, it doesn't have to be as difficult as you think. Okay, I'm going to give you several options that you can start off. I've tried all of these in my classroom, so just know that I've tried these in my classroom. Okay, and you can pick the best one that works for you. Why? Okay, let me just tell you why. Because this is what I noticed. When I gave my students like an audience, when I told them I was putting them on the internets, and I do like to say it that way, is because I had a Twitter. Actually, the whole Summerford Stars came about because of my classroom, and it sort of just stuck. So whenever I told my students, hey, I'm putting you on my Twitter, your parents are going to hear, it was a way for my parents to kind of hear what we were learning in the classroom, and it became a great way for students to really showcase and speak, communicate effectively what they were learning. So they got excited about this. So it gave them confidence. So that was the whole point. So how we're going to do this, I'm going to show you 3 ways, and you just pick the way that works for you. Okay, you don't have to take all of these ways. You can just say, hey, I'll try this. So my goal is for you to leave with at least one way you can try this in your classroom. Okay, let me talk about the first way. I thought, oh, I'm going to make this big podcast channel for my classroom. Well, I mean, it worked. It was great. It was a great starter. I used it throughout my whole year, and it was free until they started charging. But I'm just going to show you what I did. You get 5 hours with this particular one I use, and I never went over the 5 hours, because it wasn't like we had this crazy big podcast channel. It was just, remember, just a way for my kids to communicate effectively. Okay, so let me take you and show you what I use. I use Podbeam. Now, later on, when I thought I was going to when I started a tech podcast for a district that I worked on, I used Anchor, and I really liked Anchor, but I'm just going to show you what I used. Okay, I'm going to flip over, and I'm going to share my podcast channel that I use and how it worked. When we always like question our students and ask them, we ask them like, tell me about your thinking, like explain what you're learning. And sometimes you get like, I don't know. But when you say you're going to be on my podcast channel, and I'm going to put you on Twitter, and your parents are going to see, and the whole world, like, immediately, like, that changes everything. Okay, so let me show you this one right here. This one was just me going around, just asking those questions that we always ask, And we're going to tell you, have a few kids who are going to tell us about their project they are working on in science. So Avery, why don't you tell me what you're working on today?
We're working on a project called Forms of Energy. So we're trying to tell a bunch of different forms of energies and use sites and Google Drives.
Google Drive. Now, what kind of forms of energy are you working on?
Forms of heat energy we're working on is heat energy, light energy, mechanical energy.
So that's basically how that worked. I would just go and ask my students questions and they would just kind of talk to me. And because they were going to have an audience, that's what really made them like really think about what they were saying. And then they were like, Miss Summerford, I want to be next. Can you put me on the podcast channel? So it really got them excited just because they knew they had an audience. All right, let me show you some other things. I do want to show you that, how you can do this. I did this with my phone. So let me just switch back over here because I want to show you how I did this like with my phone. Now, I was not a podcast expert, and you don't have to be professionals about this. I just use my phone, and I probably could work on the volume. I know, I was an expert. But what I did is I just took my phone and I just hit record. And it was so cool because you can like select. I was like, I'm gonna be a little fancy. We're gonna be the podcast Summerford Stars. I put some effects and got some music. I needed to work on those skills, but it was fun and it was for the kids. And I was not trying to be a professional at it. Just wanted to get that effective communication. But I did it all through my phone, and that's what I really liked about it. And then I could immediately share it to my YouTube, not my YouTube, my Twitter channel. And so that's what I really liked about it is I could immediately share it, and then my parents could hear. It was like an open door into our classroom, and my parents really enjoyed that as well. So try that out. So look into those. Like I got 5 hours free. I never even went over the 5 hours. So it's up to you. I highly encourage you to try it. It just gets your kids excited about it. Okay. Another way, so if you're thinking, you know what, I don't want to be in control of it all. I don't want to have to walk around my phone and ask questions. I'm telling you, it's really simple. But anyway, here is another way. Another way that I did it is I used to have a differentiated playlists in my classroom. And one of the ways that students could show their thinking was by creating a podcast. So I can have my students like this create a podcast using Screencastify, explain 3 ways to solve 8 times 3, share your audio file with Miss Summerford. So these were third graders. And at the beginning of the year, I took a lot of time to really teach those tools like how to use Google Slides and how to share documents, because it benefited me as far as like when we got to these types of activities. So they could create a podcast, share it within, share their audio file, use Screencastify, and they came up with some amazing things. I'm going to flip back because I want to share. This was Avery and Zoe talking about explaining their math.
Today we're back on Summerford Stars, and I'm with someone today named Zoe. So yeah, Zoe, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to answer it. Here's my question. I said I asked you, okay? The third grade students.
So basically, they were just, solving their problem. It wasn't that particular question, but it was just like they were taking an activity and they were just explaining their thinking. They even went so far, like even to make a game show out of it. So they had fun and they were really like explaining their thinking in ways, I didn't have to like guide them. I just let them I gave them some quick direction on what they needed to do, and they could choose if they wanted to do this or not. So that was a great way for students to explain their thinking to me. So what I like about Screencastify and why my students liked it too, because they could go through and edit. They could edit like where their their audio would start and where it would end. So I really like that because it does let them work on their little editing skills. I saw a friend of mine come in here, Daryl. So Daryl does work with me, and he is a video editor with me as well. And so, having students work on that, from a young age gives them those skills. So when they are ready to build those big products, they have that just a little bit of knowledge to go off of. So if Screencastify, you can go, so students can go, they can export that audio file, that MP3 they don't even have to download it because it's automatically going to put it into their Google Drive. And that's what I like, because once they put it in their Google Drive, they just shared it with me and I could listen to it and decide, does this sound appropriate? Are they really showing their thinking? And then, they couldn't wait. They're like, Miss Summerbird, did you put it on our podcast channel? Or sometimes they didn't even have to ask me because we were building like portfolios, and they could go and like check, is our podcast up? Is it up and running? So they get so excited about that. So it was fun for them. So if you're like, oh, I don't want to start a podcast channel. I don't want to like get into Anchor or Podbean, use a Google Slide. Even creating like a Google Slide, making it look like a podcast channel, like an official podcast channel, having students put their audio in, their title, a little summary, and sharing that, in your learning management system, whether you use Google or Canvas, whatever you use, or putting it on your school site, you could do that as well. So that is just another way. So one way you can do that, to share your slide deck, just go to publish to the web, hit that and publish that link. And that is that link you're going to share, or even like that QR code. Sometimes, you can have this QR code and just print that out and just staple it around your room. And when students are ready to go and listen to other podcasts that are created in your classroom, and maybe they're solving like problems based on what students created in a podcast, like there are so many ways of like creating this and being creative with it with your students. So this is just a few ways that you can do that. All right. And then the last way, one of my last years and working with education, when I was still in one of the districts, I worked with GT students. I worked with kindergarten through fourth graders. And, I know I liked listening to podcasts. That's how I learned and grow. And I wanted to introduce it in a way to my students, because it makes students like paint this picture in their head and really visualize what's going on when they're listening to a podcast. So I came up with this digital storytelling. It was a way to get students to write, not only write, but to like create something from their writing. So I'm going to show you about what this is, or show you what this is. Okay, let me share this tab instead. Okay. All right. So what this is, I was hoping it would be on that area. Okay, here it is. All right. So what this became is I introduced this activity by talking about the literary elements as far as writing genres. And we talked about mystery, adventure, fantasy. And I took him on a little tour builder. We did a tour builder to kind of introduce this, just to get him excited. Then I also let them listen to a couple of podcasts, 6 minutes. Oh my goodness, 6 minute podcast was one of their favorites. So we listened to that. They got to know what an episode was and how it stops and starts and leaves a cliffhanger at the end, and it makes the audience want to listen to more. So they got to listen to and experience like how to write one and how to leave that hook at the end. Then what I did is had them start recording it and speaking and talking and really giving that information out and see if they left that hook. So we did all that, and then my district was able to provide us with videos. So I was like, why not? Okay, so let's go ahead and record this. And I gave them the parameters. I was like, you could have one background image just to be like your image face, but the whole thing is you just talking and you talking through the story. So that's what they did. They were so excited about writing to to come up with their podcast. So we called it our podcast. It just had one image. It worked. They were excited. They were excited to write and they were excited to listen to others. This one was The Mysterious House Chamber.
One cold winter day in Chambersburg, there's a mysterious house with 212 rooms, 94 stairways, 12 kitchens, 34 chimneys, and 26 bathrooms. There was a girl named Ruby who lived there. One day, Ruby went out with some friends and came back with things missing and broken. Soon Ruby said, "What happened to my house?" Then Ruby called a detective, and when the detective came, he found a dad's footprints, a daughter's, a son's.
But look at that. Like she even like disguised her voice. I let them go in the hallway. We even had these snowball microphones. Like it was so much fun. They were so excited to do these activities in class. All right, let's go back. So I hope that you think about it and you look, and maybe you could just take one idea that I shared with you today and try one of those things in your classroom, because I'm going to tell you, like, doing these things really does excite your kids, and it really does bring that effective communication, whether they're a storyteller or explaining their thinking or just being a great reflector. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have gain some new things that you can try in your classroom or share with others. So thank you so much.